First Story. Author name XX Steggy. Story title: My great-great-grandparents went into an alternate dimension. This story has been told to me many times by my maternal grandma. She's a spiritual woman who's always been in tune with spirits, energies, etc. And she isn't the type of person to lie about something like this. Each time, the details are the same. My great-great-grandparents, grandma's parents, I don't know their names, we can just call them Jane and John, lived on a farm in New Jersey, on the outskirts of a town. This particular thing happens on a Sunday. Story: Jane and John are walking into town in the afternoon, probably 1 or 2 p.m. They like to stroll around and be the typical older couple. They've lived in this area for upwards of 20 years, so they know the entire town like the back of their hands. They're friends with everyone, as this town is a small everyone knows everyone type of place. So they're walking around, no aim in mind. They comment on how sunny it is, and how there isn't a cloud in the sky. They absent-mindedly turn down a street. They then see this bridge that they never noticed before. Confused, they decided to go investigate, as they have no rush to go anywhere else. They go over to the bridge and comment on how they've never noticed it before. They're absolutely dumbfounded. How have they never seen this bridge before? There's nothing else back this way that they know of, so what does it lead to? Naturally, they go over to the bridge. It's beautiful, cast iron, floral decorations, all the good stuff. It puts them out onto a random street that they don't recognize, but that is assumed to be the middle-ish of the town. They aren't alarmed by this, but they're alert. They walk around a bit more, not really taking notice of anything else too drastically different. Once they're done with their walk, they head home and ask everyone else about the bridge. What bridge? Everyone replied. They are obviously shocked. They sit down with each other and discuss the experience. They both agree on a simple fact. They went onto a street that wasn't there. That street led to a bridge that wasn't there. There were buildings that weren't real. They went to this entirely new thing that wasn't real and somehow made it back. They talk about how it had clouded over a bit. No one else was walking around. They didn't really recognize the area, but based off where they thought they were, it seemed like the names of businesses were slightly off. A shop that was called Dave's could be Dan's or something. Not anything major, but still noteworthy. Yet they couldn't be 100% sure. My grandma agrees with me in that she thinks tiny things were altered, but they may not have noticed or mentioned it to anyone else outside themselves. The thing that is always emphasized to me when the story is being told is how no one else was outside. This happened in World War II. Cars weren't commonplace. Everyone walked everywhere. So, where was everyone? My grandma's parents made a huge grid of the streets of the town and made a point to walk down every single road to find the one with the bridge on it. My grandma's father was a very methodical man, and he devised a plan to find the street and the bridge again, as they couldn't remember the street name or how they got there. They used the huge grid, which they spent weeks on, to rule out every direction and possible route. They never did find the mystery street with the bridge. Her dad even consulted the city planners, who would look at him and ask, "What street?" just like the family did. That's my story. Sorry for the length. My grandma is a big believer in parallel dimensions and the like, and she believes that her parents went to another dimension where the town was slightly altered. Personal thoughts. So I agree with your grandma's assessment and yours. The shift was to another reality, one similar to ours. But it's just incredible. The more I read from the Glitch in the Matrix subreddit, the more I realize how many experiences similar to this there are. crossovers, or sightings of other realities, just briefly. It's fascinating. But it's also wild to know that, yeah, this isn't some new phenomenon to humanity. It seems like it's been happening for a very long time, even a century ago. I'm just always left wondering, what on earth actually triggers the crossover? I wonder if we'll ever find out. Have you, or do you know anyone, who's ever crossed over? They may not even have been aware. Theoretically, you could cross over, and there could be literally one thing different in the entire world. Or it might be something so imperceptibly small. In fact, perhaps we're always crossing over all the time. We just don't realize, because the changes are so minute. Well, let me know in the comments if you have any similar experiences. Second Story. Story title: Imaginary Wall. Author name: Famicom Wave. I work for a vacation rental company on an island. It's my job to go inspect the condos regularly and make sure everything is looking good, or if repairs need to be done, etc. Last month I was inspecting the units as usual. I had a list on my phone of about 10 units to inspect, take photos, and send a report back to the owners. We have about 150 or so units that we manage, and I've been to all of them at least one time or another. Anyways, one afternoon last month, I was going in and out of the units, just doing my job, when I came to the end of my list. The last condo to inspect was 2110. I walked in, and I was shocked. There was a kitchen to my right, bathroom to my left, bedroom area ahead of the bathroom on the left side, and to the right, where there would normally be a sofa, coffee table, and TV area, was just a big dining room table against a mirror wall. The normal setup for a studio, one-bedroom unit, is always like that. Kitchen, bathroom, beds, living room area with a TV, sofa, etc. The larger two-bedroom units have a big living room area that leads off into another bedroom, bathroom, lanai, etc. But this wasn't a two-bedroom unit as far as I could see. I looked in the mirror and adjusted my clothes, pulled out my phone, backed up so I wasn't in the picture due to the mirror reflection, and sent it to my boss on Google Hangouts. Hey, is this a new unit or something? No living room. What the heck is going on here? I texted. I then wiped my face with my arms and noticed I was pretty sweaty and greasy, so I went to the bathroom, turned on the light, and washed my hands and face real quick. When I came out of the bathroom, to my utter astonishment, there was this huge living room, sofa, love seat, coffee table, etc., leading into another bedroom with another bathroom and everything. It was all of a sudden a two-bedroom unit. I went pale white with fear and felt dizzy. Was I losing my mind? I texted my boss again. Never mind, I think I must just be seeing things. I immediately shut off all the lights and got the hell out of there ASAP. I don't really feel comfortable going back. When I checked my cell phone later, the picture I took was just a living room in the two-bedroom unit. No mirror wall. Nothing like what I saw when I first entered. Personal thoughts. So what caught my attention first was the fact that he was very greasy and sweaty. But I posted this on the Reddit thread, and he responded by saying that it's just normal, he's normally hot there, it's like 90 every day, and he wasn't turning on the ACs in the room to save time. Where my mind was heading was that his brain was concentrating, like he was peering into an alternate reality. But perhaps it's not that, or maybe it is, it just didn't require mental effort. Something just triggered it, and it's not entirely clear what it would be. And it sounds like much more than a hallucination, because the details were so vivid. He even saw himself in the mirror. I still think there's some validity in the idea that he was witnessing what the universe of a different reality was like, but only able to glimpse or step foot into it for a brief period of time. I wonder what could trigger that. Or alternatively, perhaps he really did hallucinate, but the way he describes it, I don't know. It seems like more than a hallucination to me. Have you ever had a similar experience, where you saw something that was a certain way, and then moments later it changed back to be in the way that you remember it being? Something like that. If you've experienced it, or other hallucinations, let me know in the comments. Third Story. Story title: I was suddenly much taller than normal. Author name: Ghost on Toast. This happened a few days ago. My husband and I were at home. Neither of us were intoxicated, etc. Just a normal evening. For reference, I'm 5'8" and my husband is 5'7". We've been together for years and know very well what the other one looks like head on. I had gone to the kitchen to make a sandwich, and something just felt off. I wasn't sure what until my husband asked if I was taller than usual. I was flat-footed and barefoot, but realized my viewpoint was as if I was on my tippy toes. I could see the top of the fridge, and my hips were above the kitchen counter. I turned to face my husband, and he seemed much shorter to me than usual. Our eyes are usually pretty close to even, but they seem much lower than mine. He says he felt like his height didn't change at all, just mine. Understandably, we were both freaked out, and were wandering around our apartment trying to figure out what was going on. Suddenly, everything felt right again, and I returned to the kitchen. I could no longer see the top of the fridge, and the counter was back even with my hips. My husband returned, and both of us looked right again to the other. It was like once we couldn't see each other anymore, it fixed itself. I've heard of Alice in Wonderland syndrome before, but for it to happen where someone else can see it seems impossible. Personal thoughts. Well, this is one of the more unique glitches I've yet to read. A height anomaly like this is truly bizarre, and especially given that your husband was around to witness. And it appears to be more than just a sensory glitch, because you both saw yourself as taller, even based on hip angle relative to the counter, the fridge height through your vision, and so on. I honestly just don't know. I've never seen anything like this. No anecdotes. There's no obvious explanation that pops into my mind. Because both of you saw it. If it was just you, perhaps. But two people seeing someone taller than they normally are. Huh. Very strange. Has anyone else ever experienced anything like this? It doesn't have to be height, but some kind of physical anomaly that more than one person experienced on another. I'd love to know. Fourth Story. Story title: I answered a call at work from another dimension. Author name: Candace Lee. So a few key things here before I get into it. 1. I work at the front desk at an internal medicine clinic. 2. All the phones are Cisco phones that have caller ID and a history log. 3. I've worked here for 3 years and I know pretty much all the patients extremely well. So well that our doctor will ask me if someone is our patient or not, because I can remember extremely insignificant details off the top of my head, such as a person's middle initial in their name. 4. I'm the only person who works the front desk, so unless I'm already on the call, I answer every phone call coming into the clinic. 5. Because I answer every call, I know many patients just by the sound of their voice, especially if they call frequently. 6. The doctor I work for doesn't take new patients, so we don't have an extremely high number of patients. This is also why I know so many patients so well, because it's mostly the same people, over and over with rarely any new faces to learn. 7. The patient in question during this event I know super well because he has a pseudobulbar effect where you cry or laugh in inappropriate situations. I worked there when he was diagnosed, and it's kind of a rare disease, so I remember him especially well because he often has episodes in the waiting room while checking in, and I try to make him as comfortable as possible by acting as if nothing is out of the ordinary. I would say he's one of my favorites because he's a very sweet and kind man, regardless, and has treated me with nothing but respect. Unfortunately, not the case for all of our patients. 8. Because of the pandemic, and given that most of our patients come into appointments with no acute problems, the office is doing pretty much every appointment as telemedicine, with a few exceptions here and there for things that absolutely can't be treated over the phone. 9. Telemedicine here is just a normal phone call because a physician isn't very tech savvy. The majority of our patient population is geriatric, so they really aren't tech savvy either, so we don't do video chat or anything like that. 10. The office is small. We have one physician, 2 nurses, and me, front desk. And I work in a separate but very open room with a big checkout window and a door on the same side that stays open, facing the desk, that the physician and one nurse sit at. We can just talk normally across the room to hear each other. So I generally kind of zone out when the doctor is doing telemedicine appointments, but subconsciously listen for certain key words or phrases that he usually says every single time before he sends the call to me when he's done to schedule the patient's next follow-up appointment. I'm halfway listening and I know that the doctor is currently on the phone. And then this patient calls in that I mentioned earlier with the pseudobulbar effect. We'll call him Mr. L. And Mr. L says that he was on the phone with the doctor for his telemedicine appointment, but the call dropped. Not a big deal. This happens somewhat often. I said back to him, "I think he's on the phone with someone else right now. Let me check for you. Hold on one sec." And put him on hold. I was double checking that he was on a patient call and not a personal call. The doctor will literally talk on his cell phone to friends about everything in the world. Exempli gratia. Hunting, fishing, football. You get the picture. He's older and doesn't really just text. Instead, talks on the phone a lot. But he'll only call patients on the desk, Cisco phone. So I see that he's talking on the desk phone. Obviously talking to a patient, I assume. He would never take a personal call on the Cisco desk phones because our company records every phone call. And I picked up the phone back up after being put on hold and said, "Hey, Mr. L, he's on the phone with another patient right now. Just stay by your phone and I'll get him to call you right back." But when I picked it back up from hold, there wasn't anyone there. So I start saying, "Hello?" a few times before hanging up because it was just dead silent. The nurse who sits behind the doctor on the other side of the room turns around to face me and says, "Wait, who did you just hang up with?" And I was like, "Mr. L, why?" She replied back to me and said, "Because that's who he's talking to right now." Keep in mind, the doctor is still on the phone as she's telling me this. And she tells me, "He's been on the phone with Mr. L this entire time." I knew without a doubt from the moment Mr. L called in that the doctor was already on a call and was on this call the entire time with 0 interruptions. Me and the nurse are just extremely bewildered by this, and by the time the doctor was done on his phone call and sent it to me to schedule the next appointment, I asked Mr. L if this call dropped at any point in time or if he called the office in the last few minutes. For our telemedicine appointments, the doctor calls the patient, not the other way around. He told me, "Well, I dropped my phone on the floor, but I just picked it back up and kept talking." He seemed confused by my question, so I didn't push it any further. Me and the nurse who realized this then checked the call log history, and it confirmed that the doctor's phone call was a call with Mr. L for around 13 minutes without any interruptions, and that my phone also had a call during that call from the same number His first and last name also shows up on caller ID, and it was on both phones. I also confirmed with the doctor that his call with Mr. L was never interrupted, and he confirmed that it wasn't interrupted at any point in time. When I told him what happened, he just chuckled and said we were living in the Twilight Zone and had zero logical explanation for it. I also recognized his voice, and there is zero doubt in my mind that it was indeed Mr. L I spoke to. So the only reasonable explanation that the nurse and I have been able to come up with is that maybe in another dimension, when Mr. L dropped his phone on the floor, it did drop the call, and when he called back, I answered in this dimension. But he was disconnected after I put him on hold, since it was radio silence after I picked it back up. Honestly, if you have any other reasonable explanations other than it was just someone else calling in, because I know that was impossible. The call history log backed it up. It was exactly the same phone number, and I knew his voice. Feel free to let me know. I'm honestly just mind blown by this, and while I never was disbelieving of alternate dimensions before, I was skeptical because of lack of hardcore proof, but this has definitely convinced me. A few extra notes from the author's comment in that post, reading as, I should note that the nurse who experienced this as well said that she had a few other strange things happen to her earlier in that day before this incident. Number 1, she said that her son sent a Snapchat saying, "It'll buff out," randomly. She replied back with, "What are you talking about?" thinking he sent it to her accidentally, but no. He said that she sent him a Snapchat of a huge scratch on her new car, and he replied, "It'll buff out," except that there was no scratch on her new car. I guess you could say someone else sent him a picture of a scratch on their car, but he swears it was his mom's new car, and she sent it to him. 2. Her boyfriend sent her a text message saying, "That's so funny," to a meme she supposedly tagged him in on Facebook, but she said she never tagged him in one, and when he tried to go back and find it, it wasn't there. I will say, she mentioned these things to me before the incident above, but I honestly just brushed it off thinking that maybe they were just confused, as these could be easy things to mix up. I don't think she just got excited and started making stuff up after what happened with Mr. L, because she mentioned it before that happened. However, since this is not my own personal account, and I didn't exactly see proof of this other than the text message from the boyfriend, I'm not so quick to fully believe this, and just take it for what you will, with a grain of salt. Personal thoughts. So this is one of those events that it's more of a merger, a temporary collision between alternate realities. It's not so much that you crossed over or someone else crossed over. It's more like the physics entwined briefly. More like the energies, like the radio waves or the electricity in our wires that transmit information. They were jumbled for a bit. At least this seems to be the most logical direction to go in. Especially given that your co-worker nurse also had other things that were weird happen to her. So all of these odd things coalesced within the same period of time, a few hours, and I'm imagining it hasn't happened again. Perhaps all the realities that exist out there are kind of floating in some void of emptiness, but sometimes they can come close to each other, and when they do, strange things can happen. I wonder if in that exact moment, a lot of other people experienced many strange anomalies, mergers of events that shouldn't have happened, but then after a few hours, everything just returned to normal. Perhaps. That would indeed lend credibility to the hypothesis. But perhaps we'll never know for sure. Have you ever experienced a phone call that later on proved never to have happened? Let me know in the comments. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, give the like button some love. Fifth Story. Story title: I have no memory of him being there. Author name: Mr. Bus Driver Carl. Now, this is probably me having a memory like a block of Swiss cheese, but still, it's such a weird situation I wanted to share it here. Okay, so back when I was 15 or 16, I decided I wanted a scooter. Perhaps a weird thing for a 16-year-old to want, you'd all think, but since I live in Sweden, it's actually quite normal since no one is allowed to get a driver's license until you turn 18. Anyway, I tracked down a suitable second-hand scooter in good condition. Me and my father arranged to go pick it up at the seller's house. It was 1 or 2 hours away by car. We get there, I try the scooter out, fall in love with it, and we agree on a price of around 7,000 SEK, or Swedish kroner, and we haul the thing back home on the back of a rental trailer, and that's the end of the story, right? If you remember what I wrote in the title, we now get into the weird part of the story. A few weeks ago I chatted with my friend. I don't want to name drop him here, but for the sake of the story, we can call him Osmond. Osmond and I have pretty much been friends since the day he moved to our town and started in my elementary school. He was assigned to my class and we struck a chord right off the bat. Like I said, we were chatting a few weeks back, discussing cars. We both have yet to buy one, and we discussed both prices and makes and such things. Like we always do when something major happens in our lives, we usually like to tell each other about it, and in the light of this he says, "If you ever decide to buy a car, let me know beforehand so we can do a road trip, like the time when you bought that scooter and we went to pick it up." I stared at my phone wondering what in the world he was talking about. I have absolutely no memory of him coming along with us on that trip. Absolutely nothing. And I remember a lot of other dumb, but fun, crap we have done over the years. I tell him I actually can't remember him being along for that trip. He insists he was there. He even remembered trying the scooter out as well. But I don't, and that honestly scared me. I remember the seller, the location, the weather. It was cloudy, and rain would start to fall when we drove home. I even remember a dumb garden ornament the seller had. It was supposed to be a dog who had dug down into the ground, and it had a motion sensor on its arse, and when you got close to it, the dog would bark, waggle its tail, and then fart. Classic. I remember all of that, but not Osmond being there. Like I said in the beginning of this long post, I probably have just forgotten. It was almost 15 years ago, but why that particular trip? Why do I not remember him being there? I could just ask my dad if he remembered Osmond being there, but what if he doesn't remember either? What then? Personal thoughts. This does sound like a significant twist in your memory, a total gap. As I always mention in my personal thoughts segments, memory is fickle. When we go back to remember it, to recall it, we're actually reconstructing it. The neurons in our brain and synapses, they don't operate like zeros and ones in a hard drive where they're fixed. No matter what, they never change. No, our memories, they're connected webs, but sometimes threads get lost or aren't rebuilt properly. So you can get situations where memory just doesn't add up. Now, it's less likely that if two people remember the same thing, that it's incorrect. So asking your father would make sense. But don't ask it in a leading way. Just ask him what he remembers of the time when you bought the scooter. Don't ask him about Osmond or anything like that. If he doesn't mention Osmond, then you can ask him, but phrase it in a way that doesn't spark his mind remembering something that may not have happened. So just ask him, "Do you remember anyone else coming along with us?" Something like that. That could work. But don't be too fearful. Even if your dad does remember Osmond being there, it's possible it's just a memory gap. Nothing to worry about. Or maybe something sinister is going on. I wonder. Have you ever had a situation where your memory just wasn't adding up? Something didn't make sense. You remembered something being this way, but it was actually that way? If you have, let me know in the comments. Sixth Story. Story title: A Few Seconds from Death. Author name: Crossing the Rubicon. Not 100% sure if this belongs here, so apologies in advance. My fiancé does this weird thing that he calls déjà vu, because it's the only way he can explain it. A few years ago, we were driving back from work after a night shift. We used to work together. That's how we met. The road was pretty quiet, as usual, for that time of the morning. We drove past a tiny bright yellow car with a really tall man driving it, and it just made me laugh a little because it was unusual. At this moment, he went into full panic mode and made a sound as if he struggled to get his breath. He shouted and said déjà vu, and before I could ask him what the hell he was on about, he told me to wait at the upcoming junction longer than usual. I pulled up to the junction and saw nothing at all. He said, "No, just wait. There's a car coming." I couldn't see or hear anything. I thought he was just going mad. I went to pull off, and at that exact moment, a car came flying over the bridge, doing at least 80 miles per hour in what was a 30-mile-per-hour zone. If I'd pulled out of that junction like normal, the car would have hit us. I asked him to explain what the hell that was, and he told me he sometimes sees things that happen a few seconds before they do, hence the name, déjà vu. This was the first time I'd experienced him do this, but he's done it several other times throughout our relationship. It's always just as something horrendously horrible is about to happen. Is this a glitch? How does he know these things are going to happen? Personal thoughts. It sounds like your fiancé somehow experienced the crash itself beforehand, almost as if it was a Next-style forward premonition. And what I'm referencing there is the movie Next with Nicolas Cage. I remember vividly. I don't know if people liked it, but I did. I watched quite a few times as a teenager. It certainly had its moments. But what's most interesting here is you've said that he's been able to do this again. He has this ability that if something bad is going to happen, he knows about it and can tell you, and then avoid it. So it's like predicting a possible future, not the future. Because there isn't just one future. It all depends on the choices we make. Every single action creating a new possible tree or branch of possible future realities, and all of those spawning more and more and more in an exponential curve that leads to so many possibilities that no one could actually comprehend it. But yeah, it seems like for brief periods of time, just seconds ahead, he's able to predict what's going to happen, or at least a likely scenario, and then he's able to avoid it. That's truly amazing. Seventh Story. Story title: I dropped a screw and it simply was erased from existence. Author name: Budget Buds. I was watching a radio TTS video on YouTube about glitches in the Matrix, and I remembered one situation that happened last year. Although mild, it bugs me ever since. I was in my bedroom fixing my closet, and I let a screw fall. I just watched it fall because in one hand I was holding a screwdriver, and the other I was holding all the screws that I'd taken out so far, which was where the said screw had fallen from. Anyways, as I watch it hit the ground between my feet, it bounces off the floor, hits the closet, and as soon as it hits the floor again, it just vanished. I didn't blink, I didn't look away, nothing. I stayed like 30 seconds just staring and trying to process what just happened. Again, I followed that screw with my eyes the moment it left my hand, until it transported itself to another dimension. Naturally, I start looking for it, and after 5 minutes looking under everything near me, my girlfriend, this is how I know I'm not crazy, asks me what's going on, and I explain what happened. Of course she laughs, but starts looking for it also. We look everywhere, even moved all the furniture in the room around, looking under, in, and the sides of everything in the room. It was just nowhere to be seen ever again. Before writing this, I asked her if she ever found it since then, cleaning the room or something. But nope, and neither have I. I once read a theory here on Reddit about how, theoretically, in a gazillion chances, the atoms of an object can miss the atoms of another object, and essentially pass through it. Seriously, it's the only explanation for me. So yeah, I just wrote a 4-paragraph story on how I lost a screw. Don't read too much into it. Personal thoughts. So wherever that screw is, many missing keys and socks will find too. Jokes aside though, I've actually had something very similar happen to me before. It was just with a tennis ball. I was playing catch with a friend, we were teenagers. Back and forth for, I don't know, at least half an hour. Eventually, the ball is tossed to me and I fumble it. It drops on the grass and it barely bounces up, like maybe half an inch or something. And then it was just gone. I mean, the tiniest of bounces and then it was gone. My mind can't even process it. When I try to remember back, it's almost like the tennis ball wasn't real and something's just playing with my mind, like it's a false memory. I don't know how to explain it. I get this creepy, unsettling feeling whenever I'm trying to remember it happening. It's like I'm not supposed to. I don't know if it's a glitch in the Matrix, if it's some kind of twisting of my own memory, but I know that it is incredibly unsettling. And I imagine the same feeling is felt, even if it is just a screw that vanished. Have you ever experienced a vanishing object like this? Or anything along these lines? Let me know in the comments. And as always, if you like the video, like it up. Eighth Story. Story title: Pizza Fate. Author name: Mom the Meatloaf. My boyfriend and I had ordered a couple pizzas because we were starving, but they were bigger than we thought, and we got super full off of one. So we decided, why not drive around and see if there's anyone we can give the second one to, since there's a couple of places we knew where quite a few homeless people hold up signs for food. So we drive around and drive through a couple spots, and we see no one. So then we drive through a couple of other spots and still can't find anyone, and decide to go home after stopping at the grocery store. We pull up to the grocery store, kind of feeling upset that we couldn't help someone out. And I kid you not, as we're sitting in the car about to get out, a man comes up to our car window and knocks. We roll down the window, and he tells us he's been trying to find food for his family, as he just lost his job and they've gone days without food, and he asks us if there's any way we could help him out. In the 10+ years I've lived down here and I've been going to this grocery store, I've never so much as had anyone even approach me for food or cash. So it was just pretty crazy that this guy came out of nowhere asking for help. No such thing as coincidences though, I suppose. Personal thoughts. This was a touching glitch, and I don't even know if I would qualify it exactly as a glitch. I would say perhaps only in our perception of how the universe actually works. But it does appear that we're all connected in some way. It's like the atoms that are connected in a way we don't understand via quantum entanglement. Genuinely, there's a connection that stretches in a way that we can't understand. Although in that sense, no information can be transmitted, but still, it just amazes me to see stories like this. Someone needed help, and he found it. And you know, I suppose I could reveal it now, but when I was 19, I was homeless for about 2 months in Florida. It's a long story, and I won't bore you with all the details of that. I do know that people want to help. If they see someone in need, they will help, and I did receive quite a bit of it during those roaming days. Anyways, let me know in the comments if you've ever experienced anything similar to this. If you were in need of help and looking hard and couldn't find it, but then suddenly you found someone that was willing to help. Or if you were on the giving end of this. Sometimes we're just in the right place at the right time. Maybe it is coincidence. Or maybe there are forces we don't yet understand, working to arrange events in just the right way. Ninth Story. Story title: Same Stuff, Different Day. Author name: Darkened Ford, with 2 A's. On March the 23rd, 2020, I delivered to a customer. I'm a truck driver. I'm required to be on the docks of my customer to confirm my deliveries. About halfway through the delivery, the receiver turns up to the forklift driver and says to him, "Hey, forgot to tell you, but I cooked for my daughter last night. She was just in town, so I had the pleasure to cook for her." The forklift driver replied, "Oh, yeah? That's great. What did you cook for her?" "I cooked stuffed bell peppers. My daughter loves stuffed bell peppers." Meanwhile, at the opposite end of the dock, an argument is getting heated by a couple of younger employees. It's getting bad enough that it distracts all 3 of us, and away from their conversation and work. So I ask, "Where's the supervisor?" In which the receiver replies, "He's not going to do anything. I don't know how he got the job." To this, the fork driver says, "I'm just glad that I'm nearing retirement. This time next year, I'll be at home and not fooling with any of this." The next time I deliver to this customer is August 10th, 2020, almost 5 months later. About halfway through the load, the receiver says, "Hey." At this point, I get a very euphoric déjà vu feeling. "I forgot to tell you, but I cooked for my daughter last night." I knew she was going to say that. I know what the forklift driver's response was going to be. It played out exactly the way it played out on March 23rd. Exactly. Even the argument at the opposite end of the dock. It was the strangest thing that's ever happened to me. I've had déjà vu. That seems like you've been there before, but you don't know how it'll turn out. It feels familiar after it's taken place. But this specific moment, this was not déjà vu. This was a replay. Responses from the supervisor, even the mention of retirement. I almost wanted to change the question about the supervisor, but I decided not to. I decided to let it play out. But I knew about the stuffed bell peppers as soon as the receiver said, "Hey." Personal thoughts. Well, that's very wild, to experience the same situation almost 5 months apart. I have described in the past that I've had some odd things happen to me in my life too, but there are quite a few types of glitches that I've yet to experience, and this one would definitely qualify. I've had déjà vu, as the author described, the sensation that you've already done something, but this is like knowing ahead of time what's going to happen. Now, of course, it's possible that they were playing a practical joke on you. Although, if they never admitted as such, it's less likely. What'd be the point then? Just to mess with the mind of someone you don't really even know? I don't think that would make too much sense. It would require too much coordination between multiple people for a little payoff. Have you ever felt like a repeat event happened, well beyond déjà vu? Let me know in the comments. Tenth Story. We lost 2 hours of our day and can't account for it. Author name: X Skin Bones Jones. Mark, my husband, and I decided to make a quick trip to Walmart for a few things while my daughter kept an eye on my son at home. We left the house at 4:30 p.m. and then make it to Walmart, which is about 10 minutes away, and spend no more than 20 minutes grabbing a few items and waiting in line. We check out, then head back to the car. On our way back home, we thought to stop at McDonald's, which is 2 minutes from Walmart, to grab a bite for the family. I was pregnant, and McDonald's was my craving. We live close to a military base, so 5 or 6 p.m. traffic can get backed up in the area. To our surprise, the roads weren't busy, and it was fairly quiet. At this point, we're confused and concerned. Now we're wondering if something happened to where people needed to seek shelter. We live in a town where tornadoes happen often, so I took to the sky for clues and noticed the sun is close to setting, but nothing hinting of bad weather. I tell Mark to look at how dark it's gotten, and he goes, "Oh shit, the lights are on. What the hell?" I look over and could tell he was thinking really hard. We then pull into the McDonald's drive-thru, where there's a line. Still baffled, I pick up my phone to call my daughter, and notice the time is a little after 7 p.m., 2 hours and 30 minutes since we left the house. I pause before making the call, look at the clock in the car, which is very dim, by the way, to confirm the time. I kept repeating, something was up. I call my daughter and ask her how long it's been since we left, and she says a few hours. I don't make it a big deal as I didn't want to freak her out. I rush my husband to place our order so we can get home to the kids ASAP. I'm now shuffling through my purse for our receipt at Walmart for the timestamp, and as I expected, it says we checked out at 5:08 p.m., 38 minutes after we left the house. Mark has been quiet since he noticed the car lights were on. We pull up to the house at 7:35 p.m. It's near dark, and I sit in the car with my door open as my husband unloads the car and heads to the kids. I can see our front door from the driveway, relieved my kids are okay, but afraid to make a scene because I was still freaking out internally. Mentally piecing together a timeline of the past 3 hours, desperate to make any sense of what happened. My husband returns, and we're both now sitting in silence. He looks at me and says, "I don't know, babe. I'm just glad we're home." This was 2 years ago. We talk about it every now and then, as we did tonight. I'm usually the one who brings it up. I just couldn't go to bed, so I started Googling away, and it brought me here. A post made in 2019, a year after my experience. The original poster experienced a similar situation, but most people suggested he or she may have had a seizure. I can definitely rule out a seizure in my situation, but that's all I know. Honestly, I'm not sure what I'm looking for, but I am still looking. Personal thoughts. Well, I don't want to be too cliche here, but honestly, anytime there's time loss involved, my go-to answer is aliens. I need to add the guy with the big hair in post or something because, he's funny. But it's always aliens when there's time loss. It's not so much that you lose time, it's that your memory is erased of it. So in cases like that, I suggest hypnosis, that sometimes can unlock those memories. Now, maybe something else happened, but I'm really not sure. And the one thing that could rule out aliens is that it sounds like the area you're in was populated enough where people would have seen something like that happening, an abduction. One idea would be to go back in time when this happened and look for any Google references to UFO sightings in your area at that time. Maybe some people did see it, and it just wasn't reported in the news or something. But maybe online it was. Just an idea. Personally, I have a strong internal clock as well. If I'm even off by 15 minutes, I'm spooked. It's like it just doesn't feel right. Being off by hours I would feel honestly insane. Like my mind just bugged out and isn't working. A glitch in the mental matrix. Or it just was aliens. I don't know. And that concludes this Glitch in the Matrix experience with the new format. I do hope you're enjoying it. If you've ever had any time loss or alien abduction stories, let me know in the comments. 11th Story. Story title: Meeting Our Son Before He Was Born. Author name: Venus Valkyrie J.H. So this happened about 7 or 8 years ago. My husband and I were laying in the bed one night, watching television. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a child in the doorway of our bedroom. Thinking it was our child at the time, I tapped my hubby and said, "Hey, shh, B, look, but I think Connor is going to try to scare us." He turns and looks, and this child walks into our room. I can't explain it, because it was one of those moments that seemed somehow different. We watched in silence, soon realizing that this child was not our son. He toddles in, head slightly tilted back, curls bouncing and diapers squish, squish, squishing as he goes to the end of our bed. We see his head go down, like he was crouching, and when we got up to look, he was gone. I looked at Chris, my husband, and said, "Did we just see a ghost?" Then, almost as an afterthought, I said, "Well, we know if we have another baby and he has curls, that he was here before he was born." We both laugh, because we're not trying for another baby at the time. Fascinated, we go to check on our son, and he was fast asleep. A few months later, I'm pregnant. Surprise! So fast forward, and our new baby, Liam, is 2. He toddles in the room, head tilted slightly back, and curls bouncing, and it hit me like a bucket of ice water. Holy crap. This is the baby that came to visit us. I mean, there's absolutely no doubt in my mind. Now, on top of that, whenever Liam is staying the night elsewhere, like with my parents, he comes to visit me in my sleep. For example, one time he came and just smiled at me while I was taking a nap. He was in a little red shirt, and his hair was cut short. He left with it long. The next day I go pick up the kiddos from mom, and lo and behold, his hair is freshly shorn, and he's wearing a little red shirt. I ask my mom, "Did he wear this yesterday?" And she replies, "Oh yeah, he did, but he insisted on wearing it today, so he is." So I look at him and say, "Did you go see Mama yesterday in Mama's dreams?" He just looked at me, he was 4, all big blue eyes and serious, and nodded his head. So that's my Glitch in the Matrix story. One of many, but the most profound. Our son, I guess, travels via the astral plane, and even stopped to see us before he was born. I would know those curls anywhere. The fact that my husband witnessed it with me makes it even more weird, but utterly fascinating. Personal thoughts. You know, I'm always fascinated by people who have the ability to visualize their dreams, and then their dreams become predictions. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that when you first saw your son, that it was a dream, and especially because your husband saw it with you, it does seem more likely that your son is just able to project himself forward, or in the moment. But before he was even born, that is fascinating. I wonder if you've ever experienced anything else like this. You said that you experienced other glitches, but are they related to predicting the future, or more with your son doing it? I have never personally had any experiences like this. It must feel weird, but also almost empowering. Like you have a handle on the world that other people don't, or at least your son does. If anyone has had these experiences before, like astral projection, where you can project yourself into other places or even near to other people. This usually would happen when you're sleeping. Well, let me know in the comments. 12th Story. Story title: I remember a family member committing suicide, but he's now alive. Author name: Glorious Gnome 13. Hey, this is my first post on Reddit. I recently discovered this sub, and as I've been reading stories, I realized that this is a great place to post this story. Back in the early 2000s, I remember vividly my mom telling me that my cousin, Jay, had shot and killed himself. I remember it being a big deal because he had a few kids, and they were concerned if the mothers would still let my aunt and uncle see them. He has 3 baby mamas. We all talked about how bad we felt for his kids. Fast forward to a year ago, I got a call from my mom. She starts telling me all about how Jay was engaged and getting married. She wanted to take my kids to get a dress. I was so confused. I kept thinking to myself, I thought he died. I just kind of went with it so I didn't sound like a complete jerk and delusional, but I was going through some mental confusion badly. I remember he died. After that call, all of a sudden Jay is around all of the time, at family gatherings, etc. I never said anything to anyone, but I have been horribly weirded out by his memory. He hasn't been around at all since I remember he died. I hadn't seen him or heard his name for 15 or more years. All of a sudden, he's just there, alive. I seem to be the only one who is confused. I finally said something to my mom last night after reading stories here and deciding I should see if anyone else has had this memory. She had no idea what I was talking about, and now probably thinks her daughter is losing her mind. This is really bothering me, and I can't understand why I have this memory, and he's just around now. It's incredibly creepy to me. Edit. I was finally able to talk to my sisters last night. I told them about my memory of Jay shooting himself. They all looked at me in surprise. None of them have this memory. We all convinced my mom to call our uncle, Jay's dad, and my mom's brother, to casually ask about Jay's whereabouts the last 15 years. My uncle told her that he just disappeared for about 10 years after an argument with them, and they just figured he was mad and would come back when he got over it. Apparently, they have been all talking again for 3 or more years before I found out that he wasn't dead after all. None of this explains why my memory was so different. He wasn't in jail as most people have commented. That would be pretty messed up to only make me believe he was dead and not the rest of my family. It's a complete mystery. Personal thoughts. While reading this, I was thinking, do you have any family members that are of similar name? Perhaps your mind nudged in a certain name, but it wasn't that person that had died. So my only suggestion right now that would be logical would be to find out if any family member, regardless of their name or who they were to you, had killed themselves. Because if they did, perhaps your memory superimposed on top of it over the years. I know memory can be fickle. As we think back, we're actually recreating it. It's not like storage on a hard drive, where the zeros and ones are always in the right place. Memory is very transient, and it's always reconstituted at the moment that we go look for it and recollect it. I'm not saying you're wrong, though. I'm just offering that up as a potential solution. Now, if you are correct, then that would be very bizarre. It would almost be like you crossed over to another dimension. There's always that possibility. Although, if absolutely nothing else is different in your world, then maybe it's not that. But I'm not sure what else it would be. The issue is, it wasn't just your mom telling you. You discussed it with a bunch of other people as well. about how bad you felt for his kids. So it's either a collective delusion that happened many, many years ago, or you did cross over to another reality. Has anyone else ever experienced anything like this? Not necessarily memories that don't add up, but just things that are out of place. Let me know. 13th Story. Story title: I could have died due to a drug overdose when I was 18. Author name: Straight Johnson. I took a dangerous, potentially deadly combination of Klonopin and strong opiates as a child. The next thing I know, I'm on a gurney in the back of an ambulance. After my initial protestations and thorough freakout at being tied down to some bed with two strangers looking over me, I was told that I overdosed and literally saved my life with Narcan. I end up leaving the hospital the next day. My two brothers and two good friends picked me up. On the way back to my place, we stopped at Walmart. Within 2 minutes of entering the store, an elderly woman walked to our group, paying no heed to the 4 others I was with. She looked directly at me and said, "God told me you needed this." She hands me a pamphlet. "Back from the dead. Jesus is here to save you." The pamphlet consisted of illustrations of a man waking up on a hospital gurney, dazed and confused just like I was, not even 12 hours ago. The reason for his predicament coincided with mine as well. The booklet explained how to accept Jesus into your heart, how to be saved. I'm now 32 years old. This, along with a few other experiences, has made me absolutely certain that our reality has some sort of synchronous nature. Glitch in the Matrix, God, guardian angel, or just one hell of a coincidence. In a conversation with Straight Johnson, I was told there was a small addition to his experience he wanted to include. Here it is. On the ride to Walmart, my buddy, who constantly tried to turn me to God before, well, him and I were having a conversation about the matter. The conversation concluded in me agreeing to turn to God, as long as I was given a sign within an hour or so. This was on the ride to Walmart. Personal thoughts. So, whenever I hear stories about religious or otherworldly machinations at work, I think, what is it we mean when we say God? What would be godly to us? Is there a God at all? I land more in the agnostic realm myself. That is, I don't firmly believe in any specific God, but nor do I deny one or a higher power as a possibility. It just can't be proven either way definitively. Not for me. Certainly, experiences like Johnson had here, well, it makes me question the very fundamental nature of reality. And especially if it happened to me, I'm sure my mind would be more convinced. Perhaps there is some sort of plan for all of us. Or maybe it's not a plan, maybe there's just a level of guidance to those who ask for it in times of need. It is a comforting thought, if nothing else. Have you ever received any sort of help in a time of need, but in a way that just seemed too coincidental? Let me know in the comments. Final story. Story title: My friend and I went for a long walk in the woods. When we came back, only about 10 minutes had passed. Author name: Needs More Tuba. My friend was staying over at my house for the weekend, and we decided to walk down to the pier at the creek. We left a little before noon and checked the time because her mom was picking her up around 4, and we didn't want to get in trouble. I'm absolutely sure we left just a few minutes before noon instead of misreading the clock, because a noon alarm sounded before we got to the road that went to the creek. The noon alarm was a loud siren that the fire department would test every Sunday at 12. I think it might have been on a timer, because it always happened at noon. The only other use for the siren was for emergencies, like a tornado warning. We turned onto the road that led to the trail to the creek, walked all the way there, messed around doing whatever it is we did. That's the only part I don't specifically remember, but it's not really that important since nothing strange happened. And then we went home. I think it's probably about 3/4 of a mile to the creek, but I'm not great at estimates. You can look at the map and make your own guess. Regardless, we had been gone for at least 2 hours. I've always been a very good judge of how much time has passed. So much so that when I'm cooking food, I don't even have to set an alarm. It's almost like a magic power, I'm so good at it. But even if I was horrible at keeping time, it's quite a long walk and would have been impossible to do in 10 minutes. When we returned from the creek, my mom looked at us and said, "Oh, I thought you were going to the creek." We told her that we already did, and I don't think she argued because I was a weird kid, and she was a busy mom who did all of her chores on Sunday. When we looked at the clock, it was 12:07. There is no way we could have walked all the way to the creek and back in 10 minutes. Here is the path we took. The white arrow is drawn on because there's not an actual road going to the creek. It might not be entirely accurate, but the rest of the map is. We spent our remaining 4 hours together trying to explain what had happened. I still can't. It's not the weirdest glitch I've ever experienced, but I think it was my first one. Personal thoughts. Okay, so this is another time-lost story, but don't worry. I don't think it's aliens this time. Primarily because aliens usually don't abduct people in broad daylight. It just wouldn't make sense. Also, it doesn't appear that they lost any memories. The charting of what they did to and from is pretty clear. Although he does say that he doesn't remember all the things he did when they were at the creek. But, those aren't important details. I don't think you'd remember them so long in the future. And I imagine at the time, he did remember them. It's just that now that he's recalling it years later, the memories aren't there. So I don't think it's aliens this time. I think, the obvious answer would be daylight savings time. But this is happening at midday, not at night. So daylight savings wouldn't trigger. It seems to be more like they got caught in some kind of time-freeze zone. I've heard of this before. Like there are pockets of the world that if you cross into, time sort of freezes for you, or just passes very slowly. And apparently this effect persists for a little while after you leave the area. Although I have no idea what causes these areas to appear, and they don't appear to last indefinitely. So even if you went back to the same place where it triggered, it wouldn't happen again. It might have been something like that. Outside of that, I'm really not sure. If you have any ideas or something similar has happened to you, let me know in the comments. And as always, if you liked the video, like it up.